All right, thank you very much, everybody, for taking the time out to listen to what we have to talk about with the Palacios Foundation. As you may know, we are a nonprofit organization that has been assigned role and responsibility for the Google Summer of Code. And this presentation is going to talk about what we do, what the projects are going to be about, and then we're going to have some of the mentors discuss various aspects of the project. So we're going to have Gareth Thomas, who works with Rail Decoy, which is an organization in Jamaica that does software development. And then we're going to also have Jordan Jones, who works for another company named Orba in Jamaica, and he's responsible for some of the technical coding of Talawa, and he'll be explaining some of that stuff. All right. I'm going to do a general introduction. I'm going to pause right afterwards so that we can take questions from you. And then immediately after that, we're going to go into the individual discussions from each of the mentors. And after each presentation or discussion with the mentors, then we'll take questions thereafter. Okay? So what is the Google Summer of Code? I think all of you know what it is, but in essence, it's a program in which students work under the guidance of a mentor over the summer, and they get stipends once they achieve certain predetermined goals. But what I don't think you know about is the Palacios Foundation. And let me just briefly go over what we do. So we are a nonprofit organization, and we were formed 5 years ago by a number of Jamaicans living in the United States. I currently live in California. Members of the board also live in California as well. And we wanted to find a way in which we could do a certain amount of outreach to the island. And we decided to do that through the promotion of tech, and most specifically software. And one of the issues with many developing nations, as some of you on the call may be aware of, is that access to certain types of engineering resources are just not there. The ability to have testing equipment and lab equipment, if you're doing mechanical engineering, for you to get access to motors and those sorts of things, A, is difficult, and B, you have to, especially on an island, you have to import most of those tools. But software doesn't have that issue. Everybody can download software, and we thought that software would be one of the easiest things for us to work with. The foundation gets a lot of its help from IT professional volunteers, and we get a number of our different types of budgets get funded by Jamaican companies as local sponsors. And of course, something that you must know already, we are a participant in the Google Summer of Code. So when we started this whole thing out 5 years ago, we were thinking about creating a contest for students in software development, or maybe some sort of a hackathon. But the students came back to us and said, no, that's not what we need. What we need are the following. We need to have more access to something that's more long-term in nature. We want to get the practical experience, we want to hone our various types of skills. We want to have visible contributions and general industry involvement. And in summary, what they wanted was to get professional recognition. And so we sat back, we worked with students, and we came up with various types of solutions. And they wanted to get something that was very similar to the Google Summer of Code. And we decided to approach various organizations for things like open source access to the students, and we just didn't get it. And so we decided to create the Calico Challenge. What is a Calico Challenge? It's a local Jamaican Google Summer of Code variant. And what happens is that we created our very own open source projects because we couldn't get into open source projects. And then we got Jamaican sponsors to actually finance the students over the summer. And we've had 5 years of success. So the sponsors that we've had in the past include these organizations on the island, the Jamaica Public Service, which is our electricity utility, Race Kennedy, which is a large conglomerate, NCB, which is a bank organization, Rail Decoy as a software development house, JMMB, another bank, and many others. And so they all came together recognizing the fact that there needed to be software development improvements in practical sense. and they came and started to work with us. So what next for the Palisades Foundation? Well, we want to have a global reach. We realize that Jamaica is small. The access to information, access to resources, the access to contacts, all of that is just so limited on an island with maybe 3 million people. And we wanted to find ways in which we could expand that. And so we decided to focus on specific projects that are really geared towards developing regions. And so a developing region could be developing countries. It could be a region within a country that needs additional assistance. It could be neighborhoods, but generally speaking, it's groupings of people that just have lesser access to resources. And generally speaking, they will tend to have lesser access to education. They may not necessarily be literate. They may rely more on things like audio and video versus text. They may rely more on icons versus actual words in the software development process and in the UX design. And so we want to try and figure out ways in which we can cater to those needs. We have a community development focus. And then, of course, we need to have projects that earn an income. And I'm going to talk about this in a little more detail, but one of the goals of Talawa is for the Palisades Foundation to earn an income, and we'll get to that and the reasons for that a little later. All right? So here's a Talawa mobile app. It's a community group management application. It has an API backend, it has a mobile front end, and it handles the organization and management of many different types of organizations, be they clubs, neighborhood groups, volunteer organizations, nonprofits, small religious institutions. Now, when we first came to work on the Talawa project, we thought of a means to help churches in Jamaica get more organized. And we decided to look at church management systems and various types of mobile apps that supported it. And so therefore in the documentation, you'll see occasional reference to things like the Breeze church management system or the Realm or one of these other things. But what really and truly what we want is something that's going to be universal. It doesn't necessarily need to be, we don't want it to be focused exclusively on a Christian focus thing. We realize that the world is much broader than the world is 6 to 9 billion people. Jamaica's 3 million. We'd be foolish to think that we would only want to have a service or a product that would only appeal to a smaller grouping. So we want to make sure that in everything that we do, that we think in terms of a more diverse viewpoint. And so therefore we really welcome the fact that we have people from around the world. I see we have people from Ecuador, we have people from Eastern Europe, and the like on our call. So that's really good. Now we have some goals for 2021, and goals are fairly specific. First goal is that we want to be accepted into the Google Summer of Code for 2022. And after that, we want to have one more thing, which is we want to launch Talawa as a cloud service. Now, this is where the earning of an income is important for the Palisades Foundation. The foundation gets donations from Jamaican companies. Jamaican companies do not have a lot of resources. The island is very small. And so therefore our donations are very, very unpredictable. And so what we really want to do is we want to launch Talawa as a cloud service, charge a subscription fee for that, and then use the money that comes from that to help us with additional outreach for students to do open source projects right throughout the year, and possibly even hire 1 or 2 developers that they can work on the open source projects right throughout the year. And so therefore we want to try and find a way in which we can be a sustainable nonprofit for education. So I want everybody to understand that when we put in our application to the Google Summer of Code, we were very, very clear about that. We need to earn an income. And so therefore, a number of the features that you're going to be seeing are going to be tied towards that. We have some ways in which we can do this and have a completely open source product. And we'll discuss that a little later. So just keep that in mind. And so therefore, because we want to have a cloud hosted service, we want to have the ability to do multi-organizations, and the code absolutely needs to be stable. And we need to have 100% automated testing. Many of you who started working with the code maybe a week or 2 weeks ago lamented, almost were crying that the code was not stable. And many bugs have been fixed. Many of you have done excellent work in creating that stability. But in the future, 100% automated testing needs to be a part of the blood, the lifeblood of what we're trying to do. Okay? So what are we talking about in terms of possible ideas? Now, there are many ideas that we can have. One of them is an admin portal plugin. So I spoke about the fact that we may want to have the ability to earn some sort of an income and maybe have a subscription service. And so one of the plugins that we could potentially have is something that will integrate with a credit card system and also work with certain types of pricing plans. And then if an organization either hasn't paid or needs to move into a different pricing plan, then certain features may be reduced. So for example, if you pay for a pricing plan for 100 users and you go over into 51, then obviously you won't be able to add another user, or you may not be able to do as many group chats, or the news feed may be restricted to certain things. But the business logic of that, we don't need to get into the details of that for the purposes of this discussion. But I think if your brain starts thinking about it, I think you'll come up with ideas related to this. How can we have a plugin system that can not just handle things like pricing schemes and billing, but also accepting donations, accepting membership fees, those sorts of things. Those are the types of things I challenge you to start thinking about. One of the other things is that, say, for example, you're a part of a temple organization, and you're going to be having, I don't know, some sort of a barbecue or a wedding or something, and children are involved. You may want to have a babysitting service, and people may want to check in to say that their child was checked in or checked out, so they can keep track of people. Volunteers who are volunteering to do cooking or doing flowers or those sorts of things you may want to keep track of them. So those sorts of things are interesting. So I spoke about the donation management, outreach management. This could be something like, say, for example, you have a singing group as a part of your organization, and you need somebody who knows how to play the guitar. But nobody that's there now knows how to play the guitar. But you may have in your membership list people who have stated that their hobby or that their skills, that the administrator has said that they know how to play the guitar. And so all of a sudden, you don't have to be thinking, where can I find a guitarist right now? Because you can now use those sorts of features to get involved with the membership more closely. And so we have group management. There'll be different types of groups. Things that come to mind are things like maybe there might be an addiction group, or there may be a football team or a hockey team or whatever it may be. There may be different types of groups that you may want within the organization that you want to work with. And of course, I mentioned that there's membership management. There may be registrations for events. There could be a concert that a sports day, those sorts of things. Those types of activities may need to be kept in mind. And of course, last but not least, I don't remember whether this is the actual last item on this list, but the registration of facilities. So if you're having a wedding or you're going to be having a concert, you want to make sure that your room is going to be reserved for that event. And so therefore, the overall organization, whatever it may be, may have a room. It could be a community center that has individual rooms for individual activities. Registrations would be something that would be interesting to have. And then there could be different types of planning for services. And those services could be a walkathon, or it could be pick up garbage day, or it could be an outing to the beach, those sorts of things, trying to figure out ways in which we could have those sorts of activities included as possible ideas. And social media reminders are very obvious types of things. And then lastly, I'm almost certain that this is the last one, that we can have notifications of some sort. So that may be from the administrator out to everybody else, or whatever else that may need. Okay, so I spoke about the fact that we want to have organizations and we want to have this thing to be cloud service. And because of that, certain features of Talawa are going to need to be deprecated very, very quickly. And the first one is the in-app creation of organizations. When students were working on Talawa in the second year, which was last year of the development, they created a little hack. We wanted to prove that you could do multi-organizations, and they figured out a way to do it inside the app. And upon thinking about this, it goes counter to some of the requirements that we have. The first one is that it needs to be easy to use. So if everybody within an organization can create organizations and their members can create organizations, and all of a sudden you have organizations within organizations within organizations, and it could create chaos. And we really want to try and limit that as much as possible. And then we also want to, the whole question of in-app organizational management in general, we want to move that into an admin portal, which is something that we're going to talk about a little later. That is not to say that certain limited organizational management things won't be able to be done in the app, but a majority of the ones that are in existence right now will need to be deprecated and moved to the admin portal side. And we're going to get back to that very shortly. All right, so what do we need? Now, what you're going to see here won't be a shock, but at the same time, it's going to be a little intimidating, because we want the best students globally. Now, I've spoken a lot about the fact that this is a Jamaican organization. We want to, and that we've focused on this in the beginning. But when we had the very first mentor meeting 3 or 4 weeks ago, I told the mentors in no uncertain terms, we want the best students, period. I was pausing to let that sink in. We want the best students, period. But what is a best student? And based on experiences that we've had in the past, being bright and smart and able is not sufficient. There needs to be other aspects to the character of the person that are going to be important. So I'll give you an example. I went to university in the Caribbean. I went to the University of the West Indies. I did not graduate top of my class. I went on to various other things in life, and with a very relatively low-level degree in terms of my passing, I managed to work at Netflix, where I was the network engineer that launched Netflix Video on Demand 7 or 8 years ago, maybe longer now, maybe 10 years ago. And I went on to work with Google, and now I'm a co-founder of a large data center operation in Santa Clara. And so there are other characteristics that can get you success, and I want to talk about those right now. So what does the best mean? So we want good ideas, that's obvious. And we want meaningful pull requests. Now, I know that there are little pull requests for migrating files from one folder to another, or putting up, making minor modifications to documentation. Those are good, but we need people who can really work to get the code done. And we're going to be keeping that in mind as a part of the evaluations when the time comes. We want students with we need very light supervision. And so that may come in two different ways. First, because you have a good knowledge of the subject matter, you have good knowledge of the various frameworks, and that you are able to work independently, do research on the web to try and figure out how things work. If that is a part of your characteristic in terms of your coding style and the way that you work with others, that's really, really going to be important. We want you to be reliable. I've had many situations in the past where students stopped communicating with me for a week. They stopped communicating with me for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden they suddenly reappear. And I understand that people have other types of commitments in their lives, but if one of those commitments is coming up, just let your mentor know that I'm going to be unavailable for the next week. Things are going to happen. Don't really want to get into it too much. It's personal relations or whatever it might be. Give me a week, give me 2 weeks, or whatever it may be, but give me a chance, right? Don't just disappear. Of course, we want to make sure that you meet your goals and the various types of milestones, but there's going to be some flexibility, but we need to know. The courtesy of letting us know is really important. It's a sign of maturity, and we're looking for mature individuals to help us out. And I mentioned this before, the knowledge of the frameworks, that goes straight back into the light supervision aspect. We want stable, testable code. Once again, when you guys started two weeks ago, the code wasn't so great. And we are getting to a point where it seems to be a lot better than it was, but it needs to be both stable and it needs to be automatically testable. If your pull request does not pass our testing framework, or you cannot prove to the mentors that the various functions, classes, etc., are testable, you're just going to have to go back and start to get that code done, because that's going to be super important for us, right? The code also needs to be very good in terms of readability. And there are various readability guides for the various frameworks that we use. We don't necessarily have to put that in our documentation, but there's a Flutter readability guide. There's the various other types of readability. We really, really want you to think it through and make sure that we can get that readability there, because it's not just you that's doing the code. Other people are going to be coming after you afterwards. And that this leads, once again, not just the readability of the code, but also the readability of the documentation. I made some constructive criticism on the Slack channel a number of days ago, in which there was documentation on how to install the Flutter app or the API backend. And there were things in the documentation that said things like, make sure that these environment variables are set, and then you should be okay. Well, firstly, how do you set those environment variables? It said, put it in an env file. What env file? Which location should that be in? And so you need to be writing documentation in such a way that somebody who has a reasonable understanding of the Linux command line should be able to follow your stuff that you've written word for word and get the stuff done. They should not need to go and do a Google search when they're reading your documentation. It should just be do this stepwise, and with reasonable explanations, so that people can get up to speed as quickly as possible. We've recognized that this was a failing of our past documentation. The stuff that you do needs to be well documented as well. If you're adding a new feature, please document it. We really need to understand what that means. We need to meet deadlines. That's very obvious. Need to meet deadlines. All right, so we're going to go to the next slide. And now This is the first time that we are doing the Google Summer of Code. And though we have in past lives with our Calico Challenge program, we have done up to 8 students at a time passing through the program on various projects, not just Talawa, other ones. There's no guarantee that we're going to get access to funding to support 6 to 8 students. So I want to talk about what does that mean for everybody else. Now, we are going to accept academic coursework recommendations. So if you're a student and you need on-the-job work experience as a part of your coding, as part of your program, we will do that. We have done this about every year for the last 5 years for many of the students that have gone through the Calico Challenge. And so therefore, we want you to understand that you can continue to work with us as long as you write, and for this particular part of it, I mean, if you want to work on your own and do pull requests, etc., that's fine. But if you want us to recommend you for your program, your coursework, let us know from the beginning. Let us create those milestones just like you would with the Google Summer of Code, right? It needs to be based on meaningful, consistent contributions to Talawa projects over the summer of 2021. We will do this for you. And so we recognize the fact that we were taken aback. I think there's 90 forks of Talawa, 51 or 52 forks of Talawa API. When the admin portal comes up, I'm sure there are going to be tons of forks of that. And so I know that there's a great deal of competition for very few spots. We will try to accommodate as many people as possible, as long as it's based on meaningful, consistent contributions, and that you come up with a work plan and present it to the mentor of your choice. We're not going to do the work in terms of the milestones and goals for you, but you need to come back to us and say, this is what I think I can do, and this is what I think my professor will accept in terms of a work product. All right? So work on a plan with mentors. Very important. Okay. So I'm going to talk about strategies for success. These are going to be very obvious. Visit our GitHub projects, visit the project websites, fork the repos, contact mentors, get clarifications, build rapport, and apply. And so I'm come to the end of my little presentation. If you have any questions, go to palisades.org/GSOC. And from there, let's see what you can do. I really wish you all the best. I hope this has been clear. I am focusing primarily on the non-technical aspects of the project. The mentors are going to talk about the technical aspects of the projects. Right after this, we're going to have Brandon, Gareth speaking, and then Jordan. But before we go there, I just want to ask, is there anybody that wants to or has any questions about the non-technical aspects of the project? Please let me know. So I'm going to stop sharing, stop presenting. All right. Any questions?
Hey, so can you hear me? My name is Ujjwal.
Yes, I can.
All right, so my question is basically, when I went over the GSOC website, it told that some organizations prefer students who know the subject or who knows the framework in and out. And some organizations prefer students who are ready to learn during GSOC. So my question is, what type of organization is this? Like, do you guys prefer to have students who know in and out before GSOC starts, or someone who's ready to learn during the period of 3 months?
We want to, like I'd mentioned before, we want to have people that will work fairly quickly. We have these goals that we have, and we really need to make sure that they're achievable. And the reason for that is because we need to show that we are capable and that we can find some way or prove to people that we can start earning some sort of an income, and then also that we can get into GSOC for next year. We don't necessarily need to have people who are completely conversant with the frameworks. Nobody is going to be completely conversant with the frameworks, but we want people who are going to be able to adapt very quickly. So, based on my experience, I have seen this sort of a situation. In the first month, students getting to understand what things are, how things are going. The second month, they start to become more, and not very much is achieved in the first month because they're sort of learning. Second month, a little more is achieved, and by the end of the second month, they're really, really doing well. And in the third month, there's a spurt, a big spurt. We are going to need to have possibly a combination of those two, where we have people that are very conversant at the beginning and other people who would be less conversant. What I think is best for us is to have people who have proven in the past that they can adapt. And one of the best ways in which we can come to that conclusion is based on pull requests that you've put in, and maybe some description in your application to say, well, before this, I didn't really know much about this, but I put in these pull requests, and you can see the quality of my work based on my own self-starting, and from there, evaluate and let us know. You will hear from the tone of the voices from everybody on this call that you're going to hear is that we're not a type of an elitist type of organization. We understand the limitations of many people out there. We are coming from a country that has limited resources, and the people that you're going to be talking to are some of the best resources of that limited set. And so we know where we're coming from. And I think you'll find a more accepting group. However, you do need to perform. And that's going to be very important. All right. I hope that's useful. Did that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, sir. I
yes.
Just had a question.
Go ahead. Hi, Abhi.
On the idealist of the Palisados Foundation, some of the ideas that you mentioned in the presentation, like the admin portal and the community management system, was not there on the idea list of the GSOC. So I just had a question that can we submit the proposal based on the goals of the organization for 2021 summer?
Based on, please repeat the last part. I didn't get the last part.
Yeah, I just said that there were some goals for the Palisados Foundation
Correct.
that were shown in the presentation. I just wanted to know, can we make the proposal targeting those goals also, or just we need to make the proposal based on the ideas that are given in the idea list of the...
Very good question. Very, very good question. Thank you very much for asking. Yes, we want a rounded product. We are going to have those items added to the idea list. The idea list page that is there on the GSOC link page is going to be linked to our documentation. There's going to be a list of ideas there. So no need to fear. I think some of those ideas that we've had there should be stimulating, and I really hope that you can think of ways in which that could be useful for you. All right. Anybody else?
Hello, Peter.
Hi, Rohit.
Yeah, Peter, I have a couple of questions. So I'll ask you one of them first. You mentioned that you'll be selecting very few students for this year's GSOC, right? So can you tell us a precise number as to how many will be there?
All right. So the way the Google Summer of Code works is that the organization makes a presentation to Google Summer of Code. They say, look, we have this number of mentors. We are able to support a certain number of students. At the moment, I think we have close to 20 mentors. And if we assign 2 to 3 students per mentor, we may be able to have the somewhere up to 10 students. But the fact that we can support it doesn't mean that we're going to get it. Google Summer of Code has a budget. And so they're going to look at us versus everybody else. And there's no guarantee. So I would love to be able to tell you that what the actual number is. I know that we can support up to 10. We have supported 8 students in the past per summer. And it really depends on what Google says they'll give us. So I wish I could give you more information than that, but that's the best I can do. We are going to make the best effort to get as many students as possible. All right, so that was the first question. You had a second question.
Yeah, and second question is that can we make a proposal based on 2 ideas that you all have put on the ideas list, or what you have shown in today's presentation? So can we take 2 components of an idea and then present a proposal based on that?
Yeah. So the ideas that we have are meant to be a guide. And so if you think you could combine 2, or you could build on 1, or you have something completely different, that's perfectly fine. We're not trying to limit your imaginations. But as long as the organization, the product that comes out at the end is useful and meets the goals of us being able to have some sort of a cloud service and multi-organization, and then also handle a number of these other features, then that would be useful. Yeah, we don't want to just say that this is the only way to do things. We recognize that the software has its limitations, and we want to make sure that the functionality is maximized as much as possible over the summer. All right. So somebody else had their hand up. Was that Martiv? Okay, go ahead.
And my question is a kind of like a follow-up to Rohit's last question. Is the organization expecting us to deliver different proposals on different ideas, like for example, a different proposal for admin, or is the organization expecting us to have a combined proposal? That is, a person should also know back-end, front-end, and all the developing frameworks in one proposal. Like for example, admin portal and the UI enhancement should be in one proposal itself.
Well, it depends. If I don't expect somebody to put up a proposal that says I can do Flutter and I can do web development and I can do the MongoDB backend. I think that would be really unreasonable for us to expect. If you have a specialization and you know you can do something very well, then let us know. Explain to us what you think the modifications in the other subsystems are going to be. And then we may need to try and figure out how we can get other people to assist in that as well. If you can do a little bit of both in terms of, or 3 in terms of a proof of concept, that would be useful. But I feel that students who have a specialization will probably fare a little better than those who say they can do it all. I don't think there's anybody that can do it all. So we have to keep that in mind. And we may ask students to work maybe to deprioritize certain aspects of their project or their ideas so they can help out with other ideas that have come in. We may need to do some manipulation there, because so for example, you may be giving us one set of ideas and then we're also considering ideas from somebody else, and then there could be an overlap. And so we say to ourselves, oh, well, there's an overlap. This person looks like they're stronger in this overlapping area. And let's see whether we can ask this other person to work on some other area as well. So we're going to have to be very flexible in the acceptance criteria to make sure that happens. But I think most people will have domination of maybe 2 areas maximum. They'll have a software domination in 3 areas early in your career. I don't think it's going to happen. And even professionals, they don't really have it. They usually have a preference for one or more. So keep that in mind. We're not looking necessarily for supermen and superwomen. We're looking for people who can actually get some stuff done. And we much rather have people who can do what they say they can do and that they can prove that they can do what they say they can do, rather than to have people saying, I can do it all, and then fail. We cannot afford to fail. We need to have really good code for us to be considered for next year, and we need to be on a path towards some sort of income ability in 2021, 22. Okay? Any other questions?
Hey, Peter, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Harsh.
Yeah. So one thing which you mentioned during your presentation was that you said while we are submitting a proposal, we should mention that we have done this and this PRs and have raised some particular issues. So like if someone has started late, like for talking about me, I have started today only, I have set up the project and so on, seeing or going through the code. I haven't raised any PR till now. And I guess some of other people who are present on this call would mimic me or like are me who haven't done any PRs yet. So will there be any impact on the proposals which we are submitting which have a PR or which don't have a PR?
Yes, that's a good point. We are going to be prioritizing people who have done pull requests, primarily because they would have been able to prove to us that they're capable. Now, that doesn't mean that in the next few weeks you couldn't take a look at the code and say, there's something that would be interesting that I could work on. You could, in your application, make mention of other pull requests that you've done in other open source projects. That would be useful. Maybe some examples of your own code that you think are exceptional in your own repositories on GitHub. That would be also helpful as well. But you also have to remember that in order for us to try and figure out whether you have a good understanding of what we're doing, that we are going to give priority, but not necessarily exclusive priority, to people who have done pull requests. Okay? Has that answered your question?
Yeah, thanks for the clarification.
All right.
Hello, Peter.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, good
Who's
morning.
this? Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Ritik. I have a question. My friend, he's also preparing for GSOC 2021, but in his organization, they are provided with a template for the proposal. So are we planning to have any template for proposal, or it can be unique for everyone?
Yes, there is a template on the URL that I sent. If you go to Google palisados.org/GSOC, at the bottom of the page, there's a proposal template that you can look at and use as a guide. All right.
Okay, and one more question. Yeah,
okay,
one more
ahead.
question.
Yes.
It may be a technical one. Are we going to end up this code freeze, or will it take some more time?
Very good question. We would like to have a code freeze coming up shortly. Jordan and some of the other guys are going to let you know. I'm not 100% familiar with where we are in terms of the code base right now. So please hold off on that question for a little later.
I can
Next question.
answer it.
Okay, go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, so Ritik, in terms of, and this is going for Talawa API and Talawa admin. That's going to be up soon. So what we're doing with Talawa API right now, if you guys have been looking at that repository, is that we've fixed some of the bugs that you guys were experiencing, and we're setting up a CI/CD. So the project is currently deployed on Heroku. I'm not sure if everybody saw that update in the Slack channel from Laurel, but me and him have been working to get everything stable. So as soon as everything is stable and we get all the bugs sorted out, then we can end that code freeze on the API side.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay, Patrick.
for those who are not accepted into GSOC or are not planning to participate in GSOC for this year, will we be able to still communicate with mentors and discuss our milestones with the people who are accepted into GSOC? And for beyond GSOC, will we be required to do the same format, like present our milestones and stuff like that, to continue contributing to the project?
Oh, very good question. And thank you very much for asking it. When I had that slide up, which said beyond GSOC, and we will provide academic recommendations based on your participation over the summer, that was specific if you have, that you're enrolled in some sort of work study program as a part of your coursework for your university. And so if that's the case, and you want to use the mentors to recommend you in terms of your work study experience, then yes, we would prefer if you had a proposal of some sort that you could work with, and that'd be useful. If you just want to contribute to the open source projects independently of work study programs, go ahead. The mentors and the various other co-workers, co-students will be able to assist. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. I have one more question. For the proposal, we will be emailing the mentors or you.
There are, if you go to the link in that I think Sagar has just put up in the chat, you will see the link to palisados.org/GSOC, and the whole procedure for applying is written out there. So you'll be able to do that there. Yes, okay. All right, any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
When you said you were going to deprecate the option to create an organization in-app, right?
Yes.
Will that have any involvement into like having multiple organizations in the app for a user, or will they still be able to join multiple organizations?
They will be able to join multiple organizations if they desire. We want to make sure, so for example, it's very similar to like what you can do with Instagram, where you can log into multiple accounts. It's just that each account will be tied to a different organization. So for example, if Talawa gets very, very popular, and it'll be used by a community group and a sports team and maybe a religious group. And so the person who's using Talawa could just use that one app and switch between the various organizations on demand. It's not that we don't want the app to handle multiple organizations, it's just that we don't want the organizations to be created in the app. We want to have some amount of control on the back end. And there's good reason for this. Now, if you think about what we're trying to achieve with Talawa, that we want it to be very much like a closed social media type of application in which users of a club speak with one another, that they can understand where things are going. And so therefore, say for example, it's a soccer team. The management of that soccer team may not necessarily want people to be creating subgroups or sub-organizations within the soccer team. And so therefore, they're going to want to have some amount of control. And so that's part of the reason why we want to limit the ability to create organizations. But that, like I said, that doesn't mean that you won't be able to log into different organizations from the same app. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, Peter, this is Soumya. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you, Soumya. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. So, and the mentors share a very specific set of goals that they want be done at the end of the GSOC, because the vision that the foundation has, which is really great, and for the admin portal, let's say that someone should be able to sign up via subscription, and they should be able to create organization that they can access in the app, these kinds of goals. can the mentors share very specific features that they want in the beta version or some version, so that we can focus on those goals specifically in the proposal, such that the proposal is very realistic rather than unrealistic proposal that cannot be achieved within, let's say, 2 months or 3 months?
Right. Very good question. We are, if you haven't noticed, we have spent quite a lot of time updating the documentation. If you go to the GitHub repositories and you click on the link that's in the top right hand corner, you will be able to be transformed or transported to the documentation. There are lists of features that we want to have added, and you will be able to see things that help you understand some of the requirements in terms of the admin portal. We have sections there for that, and you can take a look there. The way we are going to be talking about that very shortly in terms of the structure. Gareth is going to be coming on and just walk you through some of that. I think that should be able to answer some of your questions coming up. Okay?
Yeah, understood, Peter. Thank you so much.
All right.
Also,
all right. Yeah, go ahead.
Is the foundation is like build fast, break things kind of foundation, or it's like build slow and build solid kind of like foundation?
Yes, we are not quite. We don't have the resources of Facebook where we can where we can break things very quickly and fix them back and all of that. We have limited resources. We want to make sure that we have something that is reasonably good, that if it means reducing the scope of the project so that we can have a stable product, we'd rather have a more stable product. We are a small organization. We cannot afford for somebody to be using the application or the various things and saying, well, this thing doesn't work, I'll never use it again. We don't have that luxury. We don't have venture capitalists behind us. We are relying on you, the students. You are, in some respects, our venture capitalists. And so we need to make sure that the results that come out of this are really stable and useful. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
All right. I have to be cognizant of the time. We have gone through an hour. I would like Gareth to have a chance to speak. I'll take one more question and then we move on.
Hey, Peter. It's me again, Ujjwal.
Hi.
I just had a question for clarity. Suppose you have two students applying to GSOC. Student A has not submitted any PRs, any issues whatsoever, but his proposal is beautiful. It's something the project needs. And now you have student B. Student B has done a lot of PRs, a lot of issues. He knows the code base, but his proposal is average to below average. Who would you prefer?
Right.
Or who would you take in?
That is a very highly subjective question, and my experience has been it's very hard to tell. And what more than likely is going to happen is that the mentors are going to ask you to do some tests, type of code tests, to verify your abilities. We have had experiences in the past where we've had students with, just like you said, beautiful, absolutely stunning applications in which we would think that the person could fly without wings. And we have discovered to our dismay that the persons have not been able to perform. So we're going to have some minor tests as a part of the evaluation. We'll probably get back to you when we have a shortlist, and then you'll be able to tell. Once again, like I said, we are not necessarily looking for the absolute best people. We need people who are mature, who will write good code, who write good documentation, who won't let us down, that the code is testable, those sorts of things. We want people who are either willing to do it or are willing to do it or have done it in the past. It's really important for us. We need to have quality, especially for a small organization. And remember, this is not just for the project. The mentors that are on this call are IT professionals from Jamaica. This is a direct reflection upon their abilities and their ability to manage projects, their ability to manage teams in an international context. They are going to want to make sure that their reputations remain intact. And so therefore, they're going to want to make sure that the students that we select are really, really good. Not necessarily the brightest, but are good, that they will commit to manageable goals and be able to handle all of these supporting services. All right. So,
just to clarify, students who join late and if they have a good proposal, they have a chance of having a test for that.
Yes, and if you can show us links to your code that you have worked on in the past. At least at a minimum, try to put in a pull request for something that seems reasonable. Even if it's small, just so that we can see that you've done something. But it's not an absolute requirement. All right. But once again, the maturity of the individual is important. When I'm hiring people, I always tell the recruiters that I'm working with that I need somebody who. I don't need somebody who's, I need somebody who's hot, but not a hot shot. The hot shot type of mentality is something that we won't be able to support, unfortunately. It's just too draining to manage. We really need to have people that we can work with consistently, that we can work with in a collaborative environment, that will take some amount of direction, that will work, that will handle constructive criticism well, will be able to push back on us and say, no, I think that this is something else. So it's not just a one-way street. We also want to get feedback in the other direction. That's really important as well. Like I said, we are not an organization that is trying to scare people away. We want to attract people. We want to make sure that people who will be coming will want to work with us, either as a part of GSOC or a part of their academic acceptance or in any other way. But that's really important.